2 years ago, I was slogging through my second year at college, a small liberal arts school nestled in a sleepy town where the most exciting thing was the annual cultural project. It was a big deal, a month-long sprint to create a short film, a chance to flex our creative muscles, and maybe make something worth showing off. I was majoring in film studies, so this was my wheelhouse, but I was still finding my footing, still figuring out who I was as a creator. I wasn't picky about who I worked with. I'd chat up anyone who seemed friendly, eager to build connections, and get my hands dirty on a project. That's how I met Caleb. He was a freshman, a year younger than me, with a mop of dark hair and a nervous energy that made him seem like he was always on the verge of saying something big. We got to talking during a lecture hall break, bonding over a shared love of horror, old-school slashers, psychological thrillers, and the creepy, grainy aesthetic of analog horror that was blowing up online. He seemed passionate, maybe a little intense, but I figured that was just the creative type. When he mentioned he was putting together a group for the cultural project, I was intrigued. "It's gonna be an analog horror short," he said, eyes lighting up. "Me and my buddy Ryan are working on it, but we need someone who can handle the visuals. You in?" I didn't hesitate. "Count me in," I said, already picturing distorted VHS tapes and eerie soundscapes. Caleb added me to their group chat, and we started brainstorming. The setup was loose, 3 of us, plus Ryan, a quiet kid who mostly nodded along to Caleb's ideas. I wasn't too worried about the details yet. I just wanted to dive in and show what I could do. Caleb was cagey about the plot, saying he wanted to keep the vision pure until we were deeper in, which I thought was a bit pretentious, but not a deal breaker. I figured he was just protective of his idea. Our first meeting was in the campus library, tucked into one of those study rooms with flickering fluorescent lights. Caleb brought a notebook filled with scribbled notes and sketches, most of them chaotic, disjointed images of crows, static and shadowy figures. He leaned in, voice low like he was sharing a secret. "The toughest scene," he said, "is the centerpiece. It's a POV shot. A photographer's out in the woods, snapping pictures of birds. He zooms in on a crow, and it changes. The crow distorts, stretches, and turns into a human figure. Not like a clean transformation, something wrong, unnatural. Can you pull that off?" I was hooked. The idea was creepy, ambitious, exactly the kind of challenge I wanted. I spent the next week obsessing over it, holed up in my dorm with my laptop and a pirated copy of After Effects. I mocked up the scene using stock footage and some 3D modeling tricks I'd picked up from YouTube tutorials. The crow's feathers glitched, its form warping into a humanoid silhouette with 2 long limbs and a face that flickered like a bad TV signal. I added a low, droning hum to the audio, the kind that makes your skin crawl. When I showed it to Caleb and Ryan, their jaws dropped. "Dude," Caleb said, grinning, "this is sick." I was riding high, feeling like I'd earned my place in the group, but I also wanted to know what I was building toward. "So, what's the story?" I asked during our next meeting, a late-night session in Caleb's cramped apartment off campus. "You've got this big scene, but what's the plot? What's the horror?" Caleb's grin faded. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You don't need to know yet," he said. "Just focus on the visuals." That rubbed me the wrong way. I wasn't just a hired hand. I was part of the team. "Come on, man," I pushed. "I've been working on this for weeks. I need to know what I'm contributing to." He sighed, like I was being difficult, and finally relented. "Fine," he said, pulling out his notebook. "It's a cosmic horror thing. There's this photographer, right? He's obsessed with birds, but he's actually tapping into something bigger, something ancient. The crow he films? It's a manifestation of this entity. It starts stalking him, showing up in his photos, his dreams. It's about how humanity's too weak to handle the truth of the universe." It sounded cool in theory, but as he kept talking, the cracks started to show. The story was a mess, disjointed, with no clear stakes or character arcs. The photographer wasn't a person. He was just a prop for Caleb's half-baked philosophy about human weakness. Worse, Caleb started veering into details that made my stomach turn. The entity, he said, only targets certain people, degenerates, you know? People who don't belong. He threw out slurs like they were nothing, targeting black people, gay people, even specific religions. The horror wasn't the entity, it was Caleb's worldview, a hateful screed masquerading as a story. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what I'd just heard. Ryan, who'd been silent the whole time, just stared at the floor. I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, so I pressed him. Wait, what do you mean by degenerates? And why is this entity so selective? Caleb doubled down, his voice dripping with contempt. You know what I mean, he said. The world's messed up because of those people. The entity's just cleaning house. I felt sick. This wasn't just a bad story, it was a manifesto, and a vile one at that. I'd spent weeks pouring my energy into a project that was, at its core, a vehicle for hate. I tried to stay calm, but my voice shook as I spoke. Caleb, this is messed up. You can't make a film that's just attacking entire groups of people. It's not horror, it's propaganda. And the story doesn't even make sense. There's no logic, no emotional weight. He got defensive, fast. You just don't get it, he snapped. This is art. It's supposed to provoke. If you're too soft for it, maybe you shouldn't be here. The argument escalated. I called him out on the bigotry, the lazy writing, the whole rotten core of his vision. He got in my face, his voice rising, fists clenched. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. Ryan finally spoke up, mumbling something about calming down, but it was too late. I was done. I'm out, I said, grabbing my laptop. Use my scene if you want, but I'm not touching this again. I walked out, my heart pounding, and didn't look back. The next day, I emailed our professor, explaining that I'd left the project for creative differences and asking to join another group. She was understanding, thankfully, and hooked me up with a team working on a sci-fi short. It wasn't horror, but it was honest work, and the people were decent. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I checked in on Caleb's project, just to see what they'd done with it. What I found was infuriating. They'd scrapped my scene entirely, every frame, every sound effect, and replaced it with a blatant ripoff of the Mandela Catalog, a popular analog horror series. The crow transformation was gone, swapped for a generic alternate with glowing eyes and a distorted voice, lifted straight from someone else's work. The rest of the film was just as bad, clunky, incoherent, and still dripping with Caleb's toxic ideas. They'd even kept my name in the credits, which felt like a slap in the face. I contacted the professor again, explaining the situation and asking to have my name removed. She agreed, and I made sure every trace of my involvement was erased. Caleb and Ryan submitted the film for the cultural project, and from what I heard, it bombed. The class tore it apart in the critique session, calling it derivative and poorly executed. Caleb tried to defend it, but no one was buying it. He uploaded it to YouTube, but it sank into obscurity, buried under a handful of views and no likes. Good riddance. The whole ordeal left a sour taste in my mouth. But it wasn't the end of my story. The next year, I teamed up with my friend Maya, a game design major who'd been working on a retro-style horror game. She wanted to promote it with a short analog horror film, something to set the mood and draw players in. We kept it simple, a 5-minute piece about a cursed arcade machine that trapped players in its pixelated world. I handled the visuals, leaning hard into the glitchy VHS aesthetic I loved. Maya wrote the script, keeping it tight and creepy without any pretension. We shot it over a weekend, edited it in a week, and premiered it at the Cultural Project Showcase. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and the audience ate it up. Looking back, the experience with Caleb was a low point, but it taught me something. I'd met one of the most spiteful, self-centered, prejudiced people I'd ever come across, someone who used art as an excuse to spew venom. But I also learned to trust my instincts, to walk away from toxicity, and to seek out collaborators who shared my values. Caleb's project was a failure, not just because it was bad, but because it was built on hate. Mine and Maya's? It wasn't just a film. It was a step towards something real, something worth creating. I don't know what happened to Caleb after that. I heard he dropped out halfway through his sophomore year, but I didn't care enough to confirm. I was too busy moving forward, chasing projects that mattered, and surrounding myself with people who didn't make my skin crawl. College is a weird time. You meet all kinds, from dreamers to disasters. Caleb was the latter, but he didn't define me. He was just a chapter, and I'd already turned the page.